How's it going, guys? It is Monday, June 23rd, and you are watching another episode of TidePod, the official podcast of Tide Illustrated. Today, we have a packed episode. A lot of action has been going on in multiple sports at Alabama along the recruiting trail, and we're going to talk about it today. But first of all, Tony, how are you doing?
Good. Little change of location. My sister got married yesterday, so I'm here in Houston. In my little my dad's little sports cave over here. So, different look for me. It's kind of good to be home back in the Woodlands, Texas. But yeah, so a lot to celebrate this weekend, both for myself and I guess for Alabama as well.
Yeah, congrats to your sister, and that I'm glad that you got to go back home. But Alabama had a very busy week. Well, you were on the road, Tony. They've been on the road as well, making a lot of big time moves. And earlier this week, we had a big break in the 2026 recruiting class for Alabama. Um, they have their quarterback, Jet Damala. He is a 6'5" gunslinger from Omaha, Nebraska. He was previously committed to Iowa State, and he flipped to Alabama after recently visiting the campus, meeting with coaches Ryan Grauba and Kalen DeBoer, of course. And I mean, I don't know. I don't know if this was just me, but this kind of came out of the blue a little quickly. But definitely an interesting move. I mean, I don't know, Tony. I guess we'll start with you. But what is your initial reaction to Jet coming to Alabama?
Yeah, first of all, I mean, it's just yet another. You wrote a story about how Alabama has done well with flipped quarterbacks in the past. Bryce Young, Mac Jones. Hopefully they're going to do well with Keelan Russell. But it seems like that's the kind of their method. This kind of has Keelan Russell vibes on it a little bit. He's you look at a guy that was committed to a smaller school. Jet Thumala was committed to Iowa State. He's an Elite 11 quarterback. I don't think he's quite to the level of Keelan Russell, but he is a guy that, performed pretty well at the Elite 11. I think, what did he come in, like a 10th or 9th or something like that? I think
Yeah, he was ranked in the top 10 out there.
yeah. So, an Elite 11 quarterback, one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the nation at the moment. So I think it's great. And he joins an already really crowded quarterback room, but I think, we can talk about this too. I think he's, you look at this quarterback room and you're like, oh, maybe quarterback wasn't an important position, but quarterback's always an important position in every single recruiting class. And so to get it, an elite talent like that, it kind of gives you insurance that, depending on what happens and how everything kind of shuffles out.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts on this move. The first thing I noticed when I saw his commitment, checked out his profile, watched some of his tape, is he's 6'5". He kind of fits that Kalen DeBoer, Ryan Grubb quarterback mold
Sure.
that they're looking for. A big quarterback, a guy with a big arm. Of course, Alabama fans got an early taste of that when they brought over Austin Mack from Washington, who's 6'6". Keelan Russell is 6'3", give or take, and I think Mike Penix Jr. was right around that 6'3" mark. At least that's what Washington had him listed at. So, I mean, it kind of goes along with their identity of going for taller quarterbacks. And also, I think one thing that I'm kind of expecting to happen is I'm expecting Thamala to have a little bump in the rankings as we go on. I know a lot of people like to talk about the Bama bump, but I mean, we can just talk about Keelan Russell. I don't think Keelan Russell's bump last summer was just due to him committing to Alabama. He went on, he had a great summer. He won Elite 11 MVP. He won the Rivals passing accuracy challenge, and he put up ridiculous numbers. So I think maybe Damala can follow in Keelan's footsteps potentially as a guy who also flipped to Alabama.
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago. I remember, maybe fans that didn't know about how good Keelan Russell was. That you're looking at it. Maybe the fans that don't follow recruiting, they're looking at it like, why are you stealing an SMU quarterback? Why are they messing with those kind of flips? This guy's obviously not a big guy. And then Keelan Russell obviously proved them wrong. I think when you look at Thamala, he's a, like you said, a big quarterback and a guy that's had a lot of success as well. He did really well at the Elite 11. He's got a big arm. I think he fits the offense pretty well as well. I think that he's going to fit Kalen DeBoer's scheme. He's a guy that can sling it out to people. And so, yeah, I like the fit. I like the prospect, and I do expect him to get that I guess you would call that Bama bump maybe. But not just because he's committed to Alabama, because he's a good quarterback. I mean, we saw he's already kind of proving that. He put together some great stats in high school in his junior year, and so I think he's just going to continue on that. I'm expecting big things from him. I mean, obviously, it's going to take a while for him to uh, break onto the scene. I mean, he's not going to, I'd be surprised if he starts year one, just because Alabama's probably going to have a returning quarterback. But you never know the way things shift, the way transfers could happen. He could maybe even, if he could get hot, play his way into a backup role in his first season. I mean, he's a talented kid. So if he can hit the ground running, I think that, it could be a really big deal for him. He's a guy, I just found his stats. He had a breakout junior season last year, completed 69.6% of his passes for 3,663 yards, 47 touchdowns with just 3 interceptions. I mean, those are great numbers. Obviously the level of competition has to be factored in as well. But this is a big kid. This is somebody that Alabama fans should be excited about for sure.
Yeah, I know we wanted to get to kind of his outlook on where he fits in the quarterback room in the future. But one thing I wanted to highlight before we get there that I just kind of thought of is there a chance that Alabama takes 2 quarterbacks in this recruiting cycle? I mean, Damala, he was the commit. He's a commit here. He's obviously not as high as profile of a guy. I mean, he's not really ranked in the top 10 among quarterbacks on our service, at least, and other services. And Alabama also had another quarterback visiting this weekend. Taden Kawa, I believe is how you pronounce his name. I believe he is a Hawaiian QB. He's another 4-star guy. And then there's other quarterbacks still standing out there. I mean, a guy like Trent Seaborn, who has a lot of connection to the Alabama program, hangs around the Tua's family a lot. His trainer, Gelu Tungabailoa, is Tua's dad, and he plays for Thompson, which is one of the best high school programs in Alabama. I know he has a lot of, affinity for the program. I mean, is Alabama done at the quarterback position? I don't know. I think there might be a world where they take another guy.
I think they're going to have to maybe see how the quarterback position plays out, because right now you're at 4. It's already hard to keep 4. Why, if you bring in another guy, it's going to be a really crowded room. That being said, I mean, look, if Keelan Russell wins the job somehow, I think you have to expect Ty Simpson and Austin Mack to leave, and then you're down to 1 guy plus Thamala. That's 2. I think at that point, yeah, you would have to recruit another guy and maybe even bring in a veteran out of the transfer portal, next winter. So I think that will, if Ty Simpson, wins the starting job, and in a perfect world, Henry, for Alabama at least, Ty Simpson wins the starting job, is electric, leads Alabama to a title, whatever, then goes pro, and then he hands over the reins to either Austin Mack or Keelan Russell, and then you have Tamala, and then then if you can keep 3, assuming that somebody doesn't transfer there, then yeah, you don't need another guy. But that's not you seldom get that perfect world where everybody stays that you want to stay. I wouldn't be surprised if they either bring in another guy, maybe recruit 2 quarterbacks in this class, or like I said, bring in a veteran guy that maybe is okay with backing up or competing for a job once somebody leaves. I could see that possibly happening. And then if you have a mass exodus at the quarterback position, theoretically, I guess you could bring in another recruit and that veteran. But yeah, it just kind of depends on, maybe what happens and, who wins the starting job, really.
Yeah, so Damala, he was at Elite 11, like we mentioned. I believe, was he at Alabama this weekend? Did he fly over after the Elite 11?
I'm not sure about that. But
let me try to
yeah,
fact check that real quick.
he's been on Alabama's radar for a while now. I mean, he's been kind of like that. The rumor has been that, Alabama had a strong chance of flipping him. So this didn't come out of nowhere. This is something that Alabama's been pursuing for a while. He's definitely a big target. I think that also speaks to, his talent, is that, this is not something that Alabama just took a flyer on. They've been pursuing him for a while. They've been trying to sell him on this flip for a while. So, I think that, this was a big news, for both sides. Obviously Tom Lake gets to join an elite program. I know he had good connections over there at Iowa State, but I mean, it comes, when a big program like Alabama comes calling, it's hard to turn them down. And then for Alabama, this is a on the up prospect. I think he's really rising. I think you're going to see him. I mean, shoot, if he has another year like the numbers that we were just talking about, I don't think it's out of the question for him to get that fifth star. So we'll have to see. That'll be something that, obviously he and Alabama fans pursue. And you talk a little bit about that Bama bump. It's not going to hurt him, maybe being with Alabama, getting a little bit more notoriety. So maybe he does get that 5-star bump as well.
Yeah, but Jet Damala, a part of Alabama's hopefully big recruiting class. They had a lot of big names on campus this weekend. 5-star wide receiver Sadarian Morgan, 5-star edge Tank Jones. But Alabama also received another commitment this weekend. That was from 4-star defensive lineman J.J. Finch. Tony, you wrote about this, so I'll let you take it away on this.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've talked about it. I think our message board, Jack Knowlton can tell you too. When he was still here, every time he wrote about a recruit, they'd always talk about the defensive line and adding to the defensive line, how important it is. Alabama's going to have to try to reload at that on the defensive line, and this is a big step towards it. This is a guy, J.J. Finch, defensive end. He's rated as the 29th defensive end in the 2026 class. But I mean, I think he's probably a little bit better than that. He chose Alabama over Miami, Purdue, Tennessee, Michigan. So there's some big programs that were, trying to reel him in. Don't be scared off necessarily by he's not in the top 5 of his position. This is a guy that Alabama really wanted. And when you look at the numbers, you can see why. He had 92 tackles, including 24 for a loss and 7 sacks during his junior season. He also tallied 7 pass deflections and a pair of forced fumbles. So this guy is a difference maker on the defensive line. I think it's a big addition for Alabama. It's the 3rd defensive end that they were able to kind of reel in this class. They also have Kamarion Johnson and Jamarian Matthews. They could add maybe 2 more. When you look at it, you've got Anthony Jones, who's the number 23 overall player. That's a guy that Alabama is, a 5-star kid Alabama would very much want to bring in, big target. And then you also have Nolan Wilson too. I mean, and he's a 150 prospect as well. He's sitting in there at 122. He's kind of a bandit guy. I think Alabama will have a tough time bringing in Anthony Jones and Nolan Wilson. But at the same time, you look at it, I think they're off to a great start, and getting J.J. Finch, you circle that defensive line position as some place where you truly have to reload. You want these difference makers that can rush the passer. He's one of those guys. I like this fit for Alabama.
Yeah, Finch may be a little lower in the recruiting rankings, but he had some pretty solid offers there. I know Tennessee was in his finalists. He had other schools. He visited like LSU and Miami, so he's maybe only the 29th ranked defensive lineman in this cycle, but he's a guy who was highly pursued by multiple top schools. And of course, getting defensive line, a position of value, of a position that has vast importance on your defense, is very good for Alabama at this point. And yeah, I mean, they had a lot of other guys visiting this weekend. I mean, Anthony Jones, that would be an amazing get for Alabama to pair guys like J.J. Finch with Anthony Jones in this class. And I mean, that's the goal, right?
Right. I mean, and like I said before, Alabama fans are just begging for those difference makers on the defensive line. That to get that, it seems like it's only really been a year since but getting that Dallas Turner kind of guy back, getting that Will Anderson kind of guy back, Chris Braswell kind of guy back, you miss those guys. And I think that last year, when you looked at the lack in sacks and maybe some of those 3rd down problems where you couldn't get to the passer in time, like you were able to pressure the passer, you just couldn't get home. I think you're going to see that with LT Overton. I think you're going to see an improvement, but he's going to be gone, and you do have some depth on the defensive line, but you're losing a lot of it, and you're going to need to replace it. And so getting those high end talents. I mean, Anthony Jones is somebody that's going to be able to come in and compete right away, possibly. He's that elite talent that maybe can be a difference maker from the start. So if you're looking at replacing a guy, having that instant, you saw the way that a Will Anderson came in and was a difference maker as a freshman. You bring in those kind of players, and I think it will super help in reloading. But like I said, not to take away from JJ Finch in his moment, I think you do have a potential difference maker in him as well. He's a 6'3", 260-pound defender. I think he might be heavier than that. I think that's what we had him at Rivals, but he might be a little bit heavier than that. He kind of fits the mold of what Alabama is looking for in a defensive lineman. So, it's much like the Jet Tamala pick, commitment. I like the fit here. I think Alabama is doing a good job of bringing in talented kids that really fit their scheme and kind of going from there.
Yeah. Alabama football, though, they weren't the only team at the university this weekend to bolster the interior of their roster. Alabama basketball made a big splash on the recruiting trail on, what was it, Saturday night or Friday night?
Friday
They
night.
added Collins. Yeah, Friday night. Alabama added Collins Onyejiaika, I believe is how you pronounce his name.
I'm glad you tackled that
someone's
one
going to
because
correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'm glad. I was going to let you say the name because I can't. I'm just going to call him Collins because I'm not going to try to. Anienka is maybe that J.
I think it's on Anya Jaika something.
Anya
It's
Shaka. Okay, cool.
I believe it's
Learning
up that
it on
alley.
the fly
But
here.
yeah, Anya Jaika, that name is of course not American. He is a Nigerian player. He moved to Boston and competed at the Newman School, which is a boarding school in downtown Boston. Actually, I was just in Boston last week, so I wish this would have broken because then maybe
Did you help with
I could have made a little escapade over to the Newman.
Yeah, did you help with the recruiting? Did you throw in a good word for Nate Oates? And it's kind of fishy timing there, man. You come home from Boston and they get a Boston recruit. Maybe you're the secret agent for Nate Oates over there.
Yeah, but Collins, he's originally from Edo, Nigeria. He plays for the Newman School, which is a boarding school in Boston, like I said, and he also competes with Team New England Basketball Club and the Boston Amateur Basketball Club. He played 39 games in his junior season, averaged 9.5 points, 7.9 rebounds, and 2.7 blocks per game. And he was the number 94th ranked national prospect in the class of 2026. However, he committed to Alabama and then reclassed, so he'll be joining Alabama's roster this year. Pretty. I mean, not to make a joke here, but pretty big addition for Alabama. I mean, he's 6'4". He kind of helps out their depth on the interior. They lost Grant Nelson, Cliff Umure, Jaron Stevenson, and now they're adding a big guy with length and strength.
6'10". You said 6'4". He's 6'10". Yeah, he's a big dude. Yeah.
6'10". Sorry, yeah, 6'10". Yeah.
If he's a 6'4" center, we're Alabama's in trouble right now. But no, that's the one thing that stood out for me. He's a guy that's, when you think about guys and you look at like Jaron Stevenson, who came in a year early, he was kind of slight, and I think that kind of cost him a little bit in terms of making that adjustment. Collins is 6'10", 230. I mean, this is a big, beefy kid. So you'd have to think, look, there's going to be that adjustment period. It is tough. We've seen it with kids trying to go, just look at Jaron Stevenson, and he had those, he's a talented kid. Some people maybe thought, oh, he's got the talent to come in, maybe possibly go one and done. And then you quickly realize that wasn't going to be the case. And Jaron Stevenson had, a good 2 seasons at Alabama, but still it took a while for him to kind of develop. You look at Collins, I'm not going to say that it's not going to be that same growing period, but at the same point, like, he's a bigger kid. I think it's going to help him, it's going to at least, allow him to bang bodies better with, what's a really physical conference in the SEC. I'm not sure how much he's going to impact. Alabama has obviously Aiden Sherrill, and they have Noah Williamson, who they brought in from Bucknell. This just gives you a little bit more depth. At the same time, when you have a Patriot League player of the year in Noah Williamson, but the Patriot League is not the SEC. I think there's going to be some adjustment there, and having 2 players that kind of back up Aiden Sherrill, 2 guys to kind of spell him, and not maybe taking some of the backup, pressure off of Noah Williamson. I think it just adds to the front court. Alabama had that spot to play with. I think, getting a guy that, look, if you have to end up basically redshirting Collins here, then he comes to Alabama the same age as he would have came if he would have stayed in high school, and then he has a whole year of development in Nate Oates' system. So if that's the worst case scenario where he has the redshirt, it's still pretty good for both parties. But I think he gives Alabama some insurance. in the front court. That's the one area that they were going to add a little bit after they got LeBaron Philon back. You know, they were pretty set in the backcourt, so you were going to add a big dude. I've seen some highlights of him. He can kind of stroke from three a little bit for a big guy, right? I mean, I saw him pull up a few times. I'd have to go look at the numbers, but I think he's a guy that can at least have a little bit of a presence from there, right?
Yeah, he's definitely still a developing player. I think you hit the nail on your head with your last point. I mean, he's reclassing obviously means that he's still a year away from being a college ready player. I mean, you did mention the size, it's a big thing, you know, being 6'10", he'll be able to bring that physicality to the SEC pretty early on, I feel like, if he has to play. But at the same time, having a year in NATO's system to develop behind a guy like Aiden Sherrill, who was already there for a year, to learn from a guy like Noah Williamson, who was Patriot League Player of the Year, to learn from Nate Oates and the staff, you know, who have turned Alabama into one of the most efficient offensive programs in the country. Having that is not a bad thing at all. I know we talked a lot about if Alabama's going to fill out their roster. Collins, he becomes the 14th player on the roster. The limit is set at 15. If you want to touch on that real quick, Tony.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, so yeah, he becomes the 14th scholarship player, right? Because, or is he the third? No, he's the 13th scholarship player, right? Because Preston Murphy Jr. is not a scholarship
Yeah.
player, correct? So they theoretically, I guess, could add. Well, I think they could just add one more because I don't think the scholarship thing counts towards. I think you got 15 on a team, right? I don't expect Alabama to add. They're done after this. I'd be shocked. And I mean, barring maybe an injury and then just a late minute ad, I think Alabama's set. I mean, look, they already announced their roster numbers. They haven't announced Collins's roster number because it came out right after they announced these other ones. But no, I think they're set on the roster. I think this allows them to be flexible. You know, another thing that we can talk about too is it allows them to be flexible maybe with a guy like Taylor Bolin, who he can kind of play the three. He's an athletic four that can maybe play the three. Alabama has the depth now if they want to go big and maybe drop him down to the three, or maybe bring in a Keaton Bristow or something like that, and maybe play Bristow, Bowen, and Sherrill on the court at the same time. And you're doing that. You're not necessarily, wasting all your firing all your shots in the front court. You know, you still have some guys that are, rested, or, you have depth there while playing three bigger players on the court. It's not necessarily what NATO does a lot, but, there's times where it calls for it. And I think having that flexibility is big. I think, when you look at Taylor Bowen as well, like, he's just such a flexible, versatile player. You want to be able to use a guy like that. You want to be able to take advantage of that, that versatility. Same really with Keaton Bristow as well. So those two guys now, when you have an extra, insurance option in the front court, it allows you to kind of maybe experiment more with those guys. And so I'm excited about maybe what this allows Alabama to do in that regard as well.
Yeah, I mean, it might the fit might not, like, the comparison I'm about to make might not be a one-to-one thing, but I honestly think this could possibly, you could look at this kind of like an effort to kind of replace a guy like Mo Diabate, who was really strong in the blue collar area of the game. Mo was a little shorter than Collins is, but they have a lot of the same traits. I mean, Collins, he's 6'10", really strong for his age. He's a great rebounder. I mean, 2.7 blocks per game. He does that kind of blue collar stuff that Nate Oates is looking for, and that Alabama has kind of built their mantra around as a program, so to speak. So, like, adding that, I think no one's going to complain, even if he doesn't contribute year one. You have a guy that who at least will have a few years to develop, and maybe earn his keep and earn his spot on the roster.
And he's like a thicker guy than Noah Williamson is. And if you look at it, like, Aiden Sherrill is kind of a thicker guy as well. So, like, maybe, he's more of a natural. You're going to shift a little, not to say that you're going to do drastically different things, but you're going to shift a little bit in how you play with Aiden Sherrill, maybe when you put in Noah Williamson. So maybe it's more of a natural kind of replacement for that. And maybe he develops into being a better backup. But I think you hit it on the head. Being able to learn behind some of these guys, I think it's going to be able to develop him. And so maybe he's a guy that catches fire. I could truly see him being a red shirt or a player that doesn't play a lot, because he, it's not, you didn't necessarily think Alabama needed an extra guy, so I wouldn't be. I'm not sitting here and saying that Collins is going to be some big, impact player, because I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case. But I just think he gives you a lot of insurance, and he's a really promising guy for the future. It didn't really know he kind of him and Keaton Bristow. It's just they both kind of came out of nowhere. In terms of being on the radar, and I think they're both just great additions, and they're both guys that I think you're going to grow into. Obviously, Keaton was a transfer, but I think you're going to grow into those two guys, and you're going to look back maybe at this time next year. Keaton is obviously going to play a little bit more than Collins, but I think you're going to look back and be like, dang, two great additions that maybe like you didn't see coming or you weren't as excited about when they happened, but like ones that I think we might be pretty excited about and be talking about at this time next year.
Yeah, but Alabama adding Collins, Onyeka to the roster. Hopefully, I got that right. Tony,
We're
do you have
trying,
any parting
man. We're
thoughts?
battling.
Anything you want to?
Yeah, if he battles
Anything?
as hard in the paint as we're battling for his name, Alabama will be just fine.
Yeah, but Tony, a little shorter of an episode today. But do you have any parting thoughts to wrap us up here?
No, man. Just hopefully, I think this is the start, especially going back to football. There's going to be some fireworks in July, pun intended. But I think, definitely keep it locked here. There's going to be a lot of more news and a lot more interesting additions, high profile additions. I think, this week was fun. I think we're going to get more and more, and we got some exciting times coming up. Maybe I think that I said the basketball roster is done, but I think we got some really exciting additions on the horizon in football, and so definitely keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fireworks coming very shortly. So, like Tony said, stay tuned for that. But we appreciate you guys watching another episode of TidePod, and take it easy. Peace.
And